I grew up in northern Minnesota, very far north, and it was in an area that was rather isolated, kind of like part of the last frontier in Minnesota. It was up in an area that was Indian reservation first. And my grandfather, who came from Norway, he moved up there and homesteaded. So we lived on a homestead. So people they had their traditions, of course, with them, and music being one of those traditions. There were a lot of people that played fiddle, not harding-fiddle, but just flat fiddle, regular fiddle. And then there were always accordion players. And when people got together, and which was often and visited, even in the wintertime, I mean, if they had to take a sled and horses, they would visit. And they always had instruments there, were always present when people visited.
Hello, this is Clawhammer Mike, and you're once again watching the Upper Midwest Old-Timey Listening Party. A rather somber occasion today, as this is a tribute show to LeRoy Larson. LeRoy Larson, the great LeRoy Larson, passed away on Christmas Day of this year. Of last year, actually. It's January now. And he was a legend of Upper Midwest traditional music. Both in the research side, he ended up recording a bunch of his family and friends and people he even didn't know up in northern Minnesota back in, from the 50s to the 60s to the 70s. He recorded all these old-timers before they died, and then he put it all in his thesis, transcribed all the tunes that he had, made great indexing of all the different connections he had and what the tune structures were and everything. Put that all in his thesis, and then proceeded to start the Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble, and they presented all of this music for many decades to Minnesotans and folks all over the Upper Midwest, and they even went to the Smithsonian, the big festival out there, and they kind of were ambassadors of Upper Midwest traditional Norwegian Scandinavian music. So the passing of LeRoy Larson means that 3/4 of the current band had died in the last 14 months. But we're not going to get too somber tonight. We got a few historians to talk about LeRoy's influence and value, and we've got a bunch of musicians to celebrate LeRoy's music. And we're going to hear from the man himself from the old Fieldwood recordings. We're going to hear some tunes from LeRoy and his family too, LeRoy and his dad, so that should be fun. All that coming up on the show tonight. Let's just, since I'm assuming that everybody out there didn't know LeRoy, let's just quickly go over the a bit for a minute. LeRoy Larson passed away December 25th, 2020, at the age of 81. It goes on to say that a service will be held on January 13th. Friends and family, you can look at the link here, and they're going to have a funeral service that you can watch on Zoom. So you can always just pause this show whenever you want to and look for that link there. This is cool. Memorials can be sent to, on behalf of LeRoy Larson, to the American Swedish Institute. And then it gives the address for the Swedish Institute there. They're the ones that preserve all that Swedish-American music there. So that's cool that donations are going there. It says, on September 4th, 1939, Harry and Gina Larson celebrated the birth of their son, LeRoy Wilbur Larson. LeRoy was raised in Clearwater County, Minnesota, and he grew up playing old-time Scandinavian music. LeRoy always had an artist's heart, and he was able to pursue his lifelong passion for music. It says, after graduating from high school, LeRoy attended Bemidji State. He later completed his master's degree at Indiana University and earned his PhD from the University of Minnesota. So yeah, he was a music educator and then just an all-around banjo man. Not only did he play Upper Midwest stuff, he also put out ragtime albums, which we're not going to play tonight because of Facebook's new rules about playing music. I don't want to get us shut down. So right now we're going to get into the music. We're going to have Harry and his dad playing a couple old schottisches there up on the home front. This was recorded in the late '60s.
Not going to live too many more years from now. See? Ready?
Melody number 133, a schottisch played by Harry Larson on mandolin, LeRoy Larson on banjo.
That's it, and that's all.
So I could have played like professional production because man, the Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble, they really sounded good. Their records are produced and sound nifty. But I'm a fan of those home recordings, and it's him playing with his dad. So if you know me, that's why I'm playing that stuff because that's what I'm into. Specifically the connections of these tunes being passed down in families and the lack of it these days. But Leary was lucky enough to have a bunch of family members who were very musical, and clearly by his work that he did academically and musically, he clearly appreciated that music. So now we're going to talk to Jim Leary. Jim Leary is, of course, when you want to talk about Upper Midwest music, you go to Jim, and he has a long history with LeRoy. Jim wrote the great book that's been out for now a couple years called Folk Songs of Another America. If you don't have it, you should definitely get it. It's not only a book, but it's a CD and a DVD, and it's worth every penny. It goes into the history of the old field recorders who came through the Upper Midwest back in the early days, and so definitely check that out. And Jim's going to talk about LeRoy, and we're this is a pretty in-depth interview with Jim here, but I feel like every minute of it's worth it. So. All right, we got Jim Leary here. Jim's a great buddy of the show and just a great buddy in general. He knows everything about Upper Midwest music that you could possibly know. And he's got connections to LeRoy Larson going way back. So we're going to talk to Jim about his recollections of both LeRoy and his work. Thanks for being on the show, Jim.
Hey, it's a delight to be here, Mike, and hats off to you for all your shows and especially for this one. About LeRoy, I knew about him a little bit from the Snooze Boulevard kinds of events that were happening in the 70s, and I think LeRoy really grabbed my attention when I stopped in a holiday gas station in my hometown, Rice Lake, Wisconsin, and they had little convenience stores in there, and they had record racks, and I was always interested in seeing what the hell you could find, and there was one of those, maybe both of those two recordings he produced of Wisconsin and Minnesota old-time Scandinavian musicians with the rose mauling on the yellow and one was blue, and I thought, wow, this is amazing stuff. Because at the time, as a young folklorist, myself interested in the Upper Midwest, I felt like I was kind of the only one there, or practically the only one there. And all of a sudden, here was LeRoy, and also Bob Andreessen was involved. And luckily, in the late 70s and 80, 81, I was doing field work up in northern Wisconsin on a grant, and not too far from Duluth, I got to know Bob Andreessen quite a bit. And in 1982, the American Folklore Society met in Minneapolis, and I organized a panel. Bob came down and gave a talk on Leonard Finseth, and that night we went to a Shakey's Pizza Parlor where LeRoy was playing, doing a solo banjo act with peanuts on the floor and stuff like that, and talking in his kind of gruff and low key, sort of comic, ironic, sardonic tones about one thing or. And during a break, Bob introduced us, and LeRoy, I think he wasn't quite sure, what to make of me. Was I who the hell was I? Where was I from? And I think it cut a little ice that I was from northern Wisconsin and from the same town as Otto Rindlisbacher, and knew Otto slightly, and so I think we made a connection, but I never really got to know him much better until Bob's death. And LeRoy and I and Phil Nussbaum, Truman Sorensen, I'm not sure who else were pallbearers for Bob at Bob's funeral. And it was really sad to see Bob go, but it was wonderful to get together with those particular people. And at that point, Phil had been working with Bob and LeRoy both on documentary programs on Scandinavian music, and Bob had in his dying year, he organized all of his material and donated it to our collections at the Mills Music Library. And so over the years, I think some sentiments began to develop that, we really needed to increase these kinds of regional collections. And Bill Musser, who was trained as a librarian and archivist, part of the Footnotes band with Beth Rado, sometime around 2000, had proposed trying to get together an archive of Norwegian American folk music. And we had a meeting. Some of us came over from Madison, went over to Vesterheim and Dakota, and LeRoy came down from the Twin Cities, and we conferred about these kinds of collections. And there was some recognition then that Mills Music Library at University of Wisconsin that already had Bob's collection and Leonard Finsett's collection and a number of others. Plus we had a sound lab, and some kind of commitment might be a good place, because sound recordings are tricky to work with. You need equipment, you need technical expertise, you need storage capabilities and that sort of thing. And so LeRoy was involved in those discussions, and maybe about 7-8 years ago, when he had an earlier bout of cancer, a different kind of cancer, I found out, and I sent him a card, and it's sort of a delicate thing to bring up too, but I said, I'm not pushing anything here, but if you ever get to a point where you're wondering about a home for your collections, we'll be happy to work with you. And he wrote me he actually sent me a Gary Larson, that cartoonist with a quirky sense of humor, and it was of some of his characters who were like slaves on a galley ship or something like that, and it was break time, and he wrote time for Larson to rest. He was having to kind of cut back on things. But at any rate, I think that maybe planted a seed a little bit. And it was in 2011 that Amy Boxrud at Norwegian American Historical Association wanted to organize a Norwegian American folk music event and asked me to kind of give a keynote talk there, and I said, and she also wondered who else might be good to involve, and I said, we have to invite LeRoy, and LeRoy was delighted to come, and I moderated a little session there with him so he could talk about his life. And we were in a grand, elegant hall in St. Olaf that was very impressive, with kind of cathedral ceilings and big windows and opulent and so forth. And LeRoy's sitting there, and he says, "Yeah, we didn't have too much money when it was time for me to go to college. I went to Bemidji State," and he swept his arm around. He says, "I couldn't afford to go to St. Olaf's." And he got a hell of a good laugh out of that. But I was in a position, I guess, both to work with great folks here at Wisconsin to provide opportunities for collections to be conserved and made accessible, and also in a position to help gain more recognition for LeRoy and his accomplishments. And so, when his health began to decline here in the most recent years, and he had to downsize and move, he thought of us, and so was in touch, and we were also able to, of course, involve him in this 2018 symposium that brought you and Beth Rado and Laura Ellestad from Norway, and a bunch of Finnish and Swedish musicians as well from the region to Madison. And I think that was a cool thing. And luckily we were able to write grants then to fully catalog and create online access to his collection, the LeRoy Larson collection, which is now up with these amazing interviews that he did in the early 1970s, a lot of them in Houston County with Norwegians, but more widely also through the upper Midwest. And his notes, his indexes, the full audio materials, some photographs, we were able to put all of them up online as the LeRoy Larson collection. And he was quite thrilled by that. He said in his usual way, even my ex-wife complimented me. so but if you think about LeRoy, of course, he's known for the Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble and being an early regular on Prairie Home Companion. But for someone who, kind of came up the hard way from his rural circumstances, not having a lot of money, not necessarily having great educational mentors, but just having this kind of bootstrap orientation and tremendous drive and dedication and curiosity, for him to set out and do that field recording that he did with good sound quality. Mm-hmm. And then his wonderful dissertation from 1975, looking at the Norwegian roots of more than 100 tunes played by old-time Scandinavian musicians in the region. That was just remarkable. Nobody was, he had no prior mentors or pioneers in that kind of work to look at. He was just doing it on his own, with his own vision and gumption and brilliance. So, boy, that's just astonishing.
All right, so that's Jim. We'll get back to him in a minute. But Jim was just talking about LeRoy's research, and I thought we'd give a good example of that. One of his favorite musicians, LeRoy's favorite musicians, was Mel Brendan, who he ended up recording as part of his thesis. Recorded a bunch of Mel Brendan's tunes. Mel was an accordion player from up in northern Minnesota. And Mel eventually liked LeRoy so much that he became a member of the Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble. But what I decided to do was kind of show you kind of how this research can work in the modern age. So I took a selection of tunes from the archive. I just kind of sent them electronically to one of Norway's best button box players, award-winning folk musician named Øyvind Sandem there in Norway. And Øyvind's a fan of the show, been really sending us music right and left, so I thought this would be a good opportunity. And he picked out of all those tunes that LeRoy recorded in Mel, he picked out a mazurka here, a 3-part mazurka. And boy, this Øyvind, he has it within a half a day. He had this tune, and he just plays it beautifully. So we want to make sure that LeRoy, wherever he is, knows that his music's getting out to Norway and back. I'm sure he'd be very happy about that. So you'll be the benefit, because this is a great tune. So that's great. It ends up that Mel's family in Norway was like just right near Ivan's family, so he thinks some of their traditional music might be the same. He definitely recognizes whenever he gets into an archive of Upper Midwest tunes, he definitely recognizes a bunch of the tunes. So that's always fun, and I just love the way he plays. He's got such a happy style of accordion music there. So I think we're going to go back into that Jim Leary interview. I just wanted to, since he was talking about the archives, I wanted to show you how those archives can be used. So here we go, Jim again, part 2. What are your hopes for this, vast amount of work that you guys have archived there?
In the Upper Midwest, I think we do have a magnificent musical legacy, and it's a little complicated because, say, unlike Southwest Louisiana, it's not basically French or Cajun and Zydeco sorts of stuff. Here they're German and Scandinavian, and then the Finnish stuff is its own little thing, and then there's Czech and Bohemian, and there's the lumber camp overlay and French Canadian, and we've got Anishinaabe, and so there's kind of there's a mixture, as I tried to argue in writing about polkabilly, but I think that just in the way that in Southwest Louisiana, to take an example, or in the American Southwest with Spanish speaking or Chicana musicians, there's been this consciousness and revitalization and innovation where people are recognizing what's come before. They're drawing on the prior musical heritage and roots in all kinds of stimulating ways that aren't just what can we say, homage giving reenactments where you're trying to sound exactly like people in a kind of a museum curated put under a bell jar sort of fashion, but they're doing new sort of experimental interesting things, and I am heartened that there are people who are doing a whole range of kinds of musical responses to that material. You and Mary Pat and some of the fiddlers and Kari Touring with her really interesting and kind of visionary take on things, and there are a handful of musicians, and I'd like to see more fusions going on. Sarah Payanen is doing some cool stuff in that regard. So I guess I'm just hoping there continue to be enough people active, and we get more drawn in, and a kind of a critical mass, and just a launch of some kind of ongoing revitalization.
Yeah, well spoken. I hear you 100%. And also it kind of leads to not that this is about obviously Leroy, but your vision to kind of see this through for all these years. I have to commend you on that too. I mean, I know I always do, but this is another opportunity for me to commend you on just you also had that kind of single-handed approach to kind of see this through over all these years, kind of fighting upstream, I think some of the times. So I appreciate the heck out of you for doing that.
Well, thanks, Mike. That's
Yeah.
very-
Anything else you want to share?
Oh, let me think here. The last time I saw Leroy was in July 2019, and he had recently moved to Hudson, and he emailed me and said that in moving he'd come across another batch of 178s he wanted to donate, and so I drove up the next day. I drove up on a Sunday, and I stayed for a couple of hours talking with them, and then I drove back. But he gave me the directions with a certain landmark, and his house was located just sort of diagonally from a funeral home. He said, conveniently located. and when I got there, while we were talking, one of the books that was out was this book that his daughters had given him called The Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, which has to do with how to manage getting rid of your stuff, either before you die or after, one has died. And since Janet and I are up against the same thing, and we've both dealt with that sort of thing with our parents, I wanted to get her a copy, but I couldn't find one. And then just a little bit before Christmas, at our local Scandinavian gift shop, there was a copy that I got for Janet for Christmas. So the same day that she opened that, we were both thinking and talking about Leroy, and that was the day he died. So it was,
Wow.
It was some ways a final gift from Leroy.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking time out today, Jim, talking to us. It's been great.
My pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
Great to hear from Jim. Next up, we're going to have Laura Elstad. Laura Elstad came to America maybe 4 or 5 years ago to research Upper Midwest old-time music. And I think because Leroy both likes a really quality musician and also really likes academic type folks, he really took a liking to Laura. And so next up, we're going to hear Laura's little tribute to Leroy.
My name is Laura Elstad, and I'm from Calgary, Canada. I live in Norway. I've been living in Norway for the past 11 years, and I play hardanger fiddle. I met Leroy during field work that I did on several occasions in Minnesota and Wisconsin during the period from about 2014 to 2017. I met him a few times. And that was in connection with my PhD research at the Norwegian Academy of Music, where I'm looking at upper Midwestern Norwegian American fiddle players, both hardanger fiddle and regular fiddle. And I've worked a lot with Leroy's research, the field work that he did for his PhD. That's initially why I got in touch with him. And his research has really meant a lot to me. For my own work on my PhD. He's shared so much of his material with me, and I've based a lot of my work around his field work. So both the recordings of music that he made, the recordings that he collected from other fiddlers, their own private reel-to-reel recordings that Leroy then was given. And one of the fiddlers that I've especially looked closely at is a fiddler named Daniel Akhus, who was the son of Ivan Docus, a hardanger fiddler originally from Setesdal. And LeRoy had, thankfully, he had met Dan Akus's daughter, Babe, Thelma. Babe was her nickname, and done some interviews with her, which I believe you can hear online now through the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He interviewed Babe, and she actually donated all of Dan Akus's reel-to-reel recordings, which are hundreds, to the University of Minnesota back in the early 70s, I believe. And that is just fascinating material that I know both LeRoy and others have worked with a lot in the past. So LeRoy was really generous in sharing knowledge and materials about Dan Akus and others with me. I visited him at his house several times, and he was always super encouraging to me. We went over the bridge to Hudson, Wisconsin, and had lunch after we had looked through some of his music and materials in his office after I'd interviewed him. So I just really appreciate LeRoy, both as a musician and as a researcher, as a collector. I'm so glad to have met him, and he's been such a huge help for my work. Rest in peace, LeRoy. One more thing I forgot to mention is the name of the tune that we're going to play for you. It's called Dan's Old-Time Waltz, and it was composed by Daniel Akus. And there are many recordings of it, of Daniel Akus playing his waltz, Dan's Old-Time Waltz, in the recordings that LeRoy acquired for the University of Minnesota. Enjoy.
Yeah, so that's very, very beautiful stuff there from Norway. I should mention that Laura's significant other, I don't think she mentioned it, that he's backing her up there on banjo, playing mighty fine backup 5-string banjo right there. Next up, we have Bill Peterson of Canton, South Dakota. Not only has Bill helped Iowan Dwight Lamb preserve his rich tradition of Midwest fiddling, but also he's helped Dwight preserve the accordion tunes of his grandfather, who was from Denmark and who came over here and played a mean button bots. Dwight also plays a mean button bots, and Bill has both performed alongside of Dwight and also helped Dwight preserve all of those recordings and share them with the public. So we really appreciate the work that Bill has done contributing to both Midwest and Upper Midwest music. And now we're going to hear one of my favorite of the tunes that come from LeRoy, the Little Gem Polka. So thank you, Bill.
Sad to hear about the passing of LeRoy Larson. Always loved his music and been listening to him for years. The Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble, and actually played a lot of tunes out of his old-time music books, Scandinavian Old-Time Music Book 1 and 2, and always enjoyed all those tunes, and he did a great job preserving all that stuff over the years, and his collection is in the archives at the U of Wisconsin, I believe, in Madison now, and so that's great news, but again, want to just thanks to LeRoy for saving all this great music for future generations. Here's a little tune I really like called The Little Gem Polka.
LeRoy was kind of the professional of the Upper Midwest traditional music scene, but we want to talk about his effects on just amateur players too. So next up, we're going to have my good friend Susan, and we're going to talk to her about this music's effect on her and her family. It's cool. I love this story. All right, so we're here with Susan Karpowicz. She's a great member of the Upper Midwest Folk Fiddlers, my group. She comes religiously every week when we're in session, but right now we've been We've been put down by COVID for a while now, but we're excited to get back to it someday soon. So, Susan, I know you have a very musical family. Why don't you talk to us about how you got involved in music and how music runs through your family?
My grandfather was a fiddler, and then his grandfather was a well-known fiddler in Norway. So they brought over a lot of Norwegian fiddle music to America. However, when I was young, I didn't have an interest in any of that. I wanted to be with the cool kids and play in band, so I didn't really play fiddle or anything like that. I played clarinet, bass clarinet, everything else. It wasn't until I was an adult and my mother encouraged me to start playing the fiddle so she would have somebody to play these tunes with. She played the piano, she played accordion, she played organ. And I think it was in the 80s or so that she started buying me these LeRoy Larson books. And she got herself copies and she made sure that I got the copies, and she wrote notes on it. And she put stars on all the tunes that she really liked, that she heard her father play, and she wanted to make sure that I learned those tunes. And I wasn't a very good fiddler, but it made me pick up the fiddle and play with her whenever we got together, and my brother played guitar. So when we got together, we played out of these books, and I could not play by ear, so I had to read the music. My mom could play by ear, my brother could play by ear, but I had to have the music. So thank God for LeRoy Larson books. And to us, LeRoy was like the god of Scandinavian dance music. It's all we knew. We didn't have too much other than that to go by. And then my mom started collecting, well, of course it was cassette tapes back then, but these are some of the CDs that I got from her house. She passed away in 2017. But she listened to these cassette tapes. I think she wore the tapes out because she loved the music so much. So I have LeRoy Larson to thank. Even though I didn't know who he was, I knew of him. My mom, probably being up in North Dakota, she heard him on the radio. I'm not sure if she saw him in person, but she sure knew who he was. So we really have to thank him for a lot of that roots and instilling that type of music in us. And then when you started the Upper Midwest Folk Fiddler Group, it just seemed like, bingo, that's where I need to be. It just fit.
So that's Susan sharing her personal stories of her family's connections to LeRoy Larson's music. Next up, we're going to have Phil Nussbaum. Phil Nussbaum is another a great archiver of this music. He went throughout Minnesota and did his own field research after about 20 years after LeRoy did. And we have him to thank for a bunch of great recordings. So, of course, LeRoy was his inspiration, and we're going to talk to Phil about LeRoy here and see what he has to say. All right, so we're here with Phil Nussbaum, and we're talking about LeRoy Larson, the great LeRoy Larson. And Phil's going to share his early memories of LeRoy and then kind of some of LeRoy's lasting legacy with us. So how's it going today, Phil?
It's going well, Mike. The sun is out, and in January, you really can't ask for more.
Yeah, exactly. So we're inside and warm, and everything's good. Everything's good with us. So, yeah. So talk a little bit about how you first met LeRoy and what your first impressions of him were.
Well, I heard the Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble. I first heard him on record. And I thought, wow, this is a really tight band. And when you read the liner notes and, and found out about LeRoy, he was the scholar of the Scandinavian old-time. And he also, he met a lot of good players in his research, and he recorded them. And then that's how he met Mel Brendan. And then recruited Mel for his band, and that was one really good band. And I think I heard them at Nordic Fest. I know I met Bob Andreessen at Nordic Fest, and I kind of kept them in mind, and I didn't forget those encounters. There were, as far as radio programming went, which is what I was doing then. I was a folk music announcer. It was superior. both in the kinds of things they said and the music that they put out. Anyway, at the State Arts Board, we figured, well, we'll do this recording project. And I went over to LeRoy's house, and we talked about it, and he was all for it. And really, to a large extent, the contacts that he and Bob Andreessen provided were the artists that I went to record. Not all. LeRoy was fixed on old time. I wanted to include some other things too, like Hardanger music. And then I found out about some players other ways. But that's because he could have said it's already been done. Who needs this? But he didn't. And I think the project turned out to be very satisfying. Let's put it that way. Met a lot of nice people. Got to hear a lot of good music, and really learned about instrumental music, mostly instrumental music area that I didn't know that much about. And I don't think the world knows that much about. What there really needs to happen is some kind of Grand Ole Opry for music that exists above the Mason-Dixon line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one.
How is that for an idea?
I really like that idea.
Talk about never happened, but anyway.
So did you keep up with him through these years, or have you had connections with him over the years, or how's that gone?
We'd see each other here and there, got together once or twice. He took me out in his boat once. Oh. That was fun. Okay, what was LeRoy like in front of an audience? Well, he knew his audience. And they were very good, of course, the Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble. But LeRoy is exhibit A in addressing an audience that he knows. He told me, he had a part of his entertaining that was just a little bit risque, and I mean a little bit. But his audience of older people, frequently older women, could be they could be offended pretty easily. So LeRoy said he would tell one joke and he would fix on some of the older ones in the crowd, and depending on their reaction, he knew which way he had to go with his humor and commentary. So, talk about being in command of the situation. And by the way, he was very funny. Mm. Yeah, he has that dry, witty sense of humor that's very, very sneaks in, and then you really think it's pretty funny. Yeah. He would do it in such a way that was not accusing, it was just welcoming. Mm-hmm. Of course, the music that they played, they were all the players that I've known were engaged in the tradition. Even when he was up in years, Mel Brendan, I remember seeing him in Waterloo, Iowa. It was something that the Arts Council in Iowa was doing, some kind of a festival, and he had just figured out this new, really complicated composed piece by a Swedish composer, and so excited about it. And by the way, they pulled it off in concert just expertly, just beautifully. That's great. So what do you think LeRoy's lasting legacy is for Upper Midwest traditional music? Well, it just depends on what people want to run with. He set a high standard for scholarship. I read his dissertation, and some of it really stuck with me, where he talked in his dissertation about how the immigrants from rural areas were dancing to forms like the Springer and the Halling, but the ones from more urban areas were doing waltz, polka, schottische. So you get the sociology right there of the dances. And there's always more that can be done with that, but also, combining it with a high level of music performance. As you know, old time music, regardless of tradition, is usually amateur. But when you saw the Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble, you saw a professional quality band. And there really hasn't been another band playing old time, and that I know of, that attempted to put it out there consistently, and to be like a professional band. I don't know. Well, I would like to say that I think it could be, depending on the presentation and how much you wanted to promote it. As you know, a lot depends on promotion and being willing to travel. But I like to see that kind of representation. Other regions have it, and I would like that to be Leroy's legacy. Otherwise, if you hung out with him, he was funny as heck. And he was. I always enjoyed running into Leroy.
That's great. Well, thanks for spending time with us today, and Phil, talk about your friend Leroy.
Thank you, Mike, for the opportunity. There'll never be another.
Great Phil Nussbaum there, and he would know what he's talking about and all that stuff about presentation, as he hosts a nationally syndicated traditional music radio show, and we all locally know him from Bluegrass Saturday Morning, so he knows what he talks about when he talks about Leroy's traditional music band, the Minnesota Scandinavian Ensemble, being a real professional act, which I found to be very, very interesting. All of the interviews tonight I find to just be really fascinating, and obviously a lot of love for Leroy and his contributions to the music out there. We'll let his funeral do the family side of it and other stuff like that, but we're just taking care of the music and somewhat the academic side of remembering this great Leroy Larson. So we're going to end it today with another tune, our final tune from Jason Busnewski. He's in Wisconsin, and he's had Leroy's books for years and been learning tunes out of them. So he came forward. He said, I definitely want to share a tune. So although we had a lot of talking today because Leroy was an academic, we want to make sure we get the tunes in too. So thank you all for watching, and rest in peace, Leroy Larson.